Hello paper crafters, I'm Sunny Sky and here's the card we're making today. This is a pretty simple layout. We're really focusing on the coloring and on shading techniques when you're coloring on your cards. So I do have a little diagram for you on shading and where you choose your light source and the shadowed areas. So as soon as you don't see my face, just hit pause on the YouTube video and you can take a closer look at the kind of my notes here, and then we'll go through it step by step. Hit pause on the video if you want to look at this a little more in depth, but this is the just sort of general diagram that I created for my Stamp Club members. If your light source is up here, you can kind of figure the light is going to come out like there, and you can see where I've penciled in yellow the parts of her dress that the light would hit, parts that are going to stick out. They're just above her breasts are going to stick out, her shoulder, and the front of her skirt sort of to the center. Then underneath her arms, they're going to be in shadow, and that's going to be in orange there. Right around her waist there, under her breasts, that's where there's anytime there's a crease in the body, and a lot of times your stamps will have dark areas, and this, of course, because the sun is shining behind her, the front and bottom of her dress is going to be dark as well. And then I just put an in-between section in kind of a green color, and that would just be kind of the in-betweens. Okay, so now we're ready to stamp our little lady. Here we have Memento ink and StazOn ink. So if you are stamping with alcohol markers, such as our Stampin' blends, this is a water-based ink and this is what you're going to use. If you are doing something with water and you don't want your image to bleed, you need to use an alcohol-based ink for your background, for your stamped image. So we're going to use the StazOn today because we're coloring with watercolor pencils today, which are water-based. And so I'm going to stamp this lovely lady in an alcohol base because I don't want the black line to bleed as I'm coloring in. Now I'm using watercolor pencils, so they're going to be just fine. It's not going to bleed with that, but I'm going to go back with my water brush, my Aqua painter, afterwards and get it wet. So therefore I want to make sure that I'm using something that is not going to bleed. All right, I've just got an old batch of watercolor crayons here, but we are going to use those. And the same principles for light and dark and shading are going to apply whether you're using pencils or markers or any other medium. And I'm just going to test here so I can kind of see the shadows of my blues, make sure I have them light to dark. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put in a little color in this area that I said would be light. Parts where the sun is going to hit her if my sun is coming from this area here. That's going to be light there. Kind of the center front of her dress is going to be light there. And then I'm going to go dark next. And I'm going to put in a little pencil where and down under her arms. It's going to be dark. Right under there it would be dark. This part here is going to be dark. And then down at the bottom. And when you're adding water later, you don't have to put color in everywhere. But I am laying on a bit of color here, and then I'm just going to come back with the medium blue and kind of fill in. I'm leaving some white because we are going to add the water and it'll blend all together. Now, when you're adding your blending solution, it could be Blender pen or the Aqua painter, you're going to go from your color and spread out, and you're going to have less color showing when you spread out. I'm going to start with my lights. I'm just going to kind of muddy them up a little bit and let them spread out a little bit, and then you clean it off if you're going to a different color. And I'm going to bring my dark blues up and blend them in a little bit. Now this is standard Whisper White cardstock, so it cannot take a whole lot of water. I can't spend a whole lot of time with this or it'll get really muddied and wet. But if you're using watercolor paper, it's more textured, and so it's harder to get a firm image. And so just for a beginning basic tutorial for my Stamp Club members, we just used plain paper just to kind of get a feel for it. So it kind of muddies it together a little bit. If you want a darker color, you can always come back in and add more pencil and then blend again if you want to get more contrast in your shading. All right, and then here again is our sample and where I kind of did it with the pencil, and then this pencil is where once I had watercolored, you can see the colors have bled together a little more. I'm doing the same thing here. Also, her hat underneath her brim is going to be dark, and I'm going to go ahead and make that pretty dark with my watercolor pencil because it's going to be quite dark. Over here, kind of her hand is in the way. That's creating some shadow. And then where the sun is shining from the back of her head, you're going to have that paler color. And I'll just go from the light and I'll just pull over into the darker section there. Some of the dark back over. So let me just show you again here. You can make it really dark, you can make it really pale, and you're going to get a darker batch if you do that. And as you keep going, see how I'm losing color there. So if you're starting with some color and you don't want it to be that bold on your image, you can always start off on another piece of cardstock and come and bring it in. And we'll just do a little shadowing behind her here. I'm just pulling some color off of there and create her a little background. And it's the same blue we used on her dress, but it kind of anchors her into the background there. It's paler than what we had before. Okay, so that is a really, really basic tutorial on shading and a light source. And let me show you again this finished card. And we sponged with our blue ink, pale blue ink around the edges here, also around our greeting. I just took a little bit of dainty ribbon because it was a dainty card and added a mini glue dot behind it and used some background paper, some designer series paper. On the inside, stamped just a simple, this is a shadow image of her dress. Just stamped it in the same pale blue that we sponged around the edges on the cover. Just because this fresh fig paper is very dark to print on, so I created a liner on the inside of the card. So thank you guys for stopping by and joining me today. Remember to shop, share, subscribe, like the video if you did enjoy this technique, and go have some fun crafting today.